Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Talking Law from Women in the Law and Business UK. This month's episode is brought to you by Hall Brown Family Law in Manchester and London. I'm Sally Penny, a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester. I'm also the joint vice chair of the Association of Women Barristers, and I am the founder of Women in the Law and Business UK, an organisation which is passionate about supporting the next leaders in law and encouraging a career progression through personal development. This month, we'll meet James Brown from Hall Brown Family Law. He's a co-founder of Hall Brown. He specialises in divorce involving complex family issues with cases involving up to £100 million and some very high-profile clients.
The biggest driver for challenges and well-being in our discipline is the emotional needs of any client in any given situation, whether they are high net worth or not.
Yeah.
You get an awful lot of transference where you have individuals who are upset about the difficulties that they are having and very much look to blame you. And of course, as a family lawyer, you are often the bearer of bad news and often get blamed for that.
But first, a roundup of what's been happening in the world of Women in the Law and Business UK. We are all looking forward to seeing you at our inaugural annual conference on the 15th of November at DLA Piper in Manchester. Don't forget to book your tickets. We're also looking forward to seeing all of you on the 3rd of December at our Christmas event. Do join us at Irwin Mitchell in Manchester and also at BLM in London on the 12th of December. Oh, and don't forget to order our Women in the Law UK book celebrating 100 years of women in law. For a full rundown of who we are and how you can get involved, please visit womeninthelawuk.com. Now to this month's interview. James Hall practices family law at his firm, Hall Brown, in Manchester. James is named as a leading expert in the Independent Directory Chambers and Partners and leading individual in Legal 500. He regularly appears across television and radio, as well as giving regular lectures. I asked James if his career had turned out as expected.
Yes and no. One of the reasons why I chose the kind of solicitor route rather than the barrister route is because I thought I'd find law interesting. Thank goodness I did, given the fact that I do a bit of it every day. But I also wanted the opportunity to kind of run a business, have a team, etc. And of course, that gives me that really nice balance. I didn't anticipate doing it at the level of the kind of legal side of things that we're doing it. I never imagined I'd do kind of cases of this magnitude, etc.
Yeah,
and that really was just a kind of a series of fortunate accidents. So, yes and no.
And what has surprised you most about your career?
This sounds like an advert, and it's really not. But the thing that kind of on a day-to-day basis we are most surprised by is how fast we've grown. That's a current thing.
Yeah.
I think previously what I was slightly amazed by was the fact that there are these individuals out there who you imagine are terribly impressive, terribly confident, really know what they're doing, and you imagine senior lawyers to kind of have all the answers. What's been most amazing to me is to find that the more senior you get, the more, certainly the better ones of them, don't have all the answers.
No.
And what they are doing is, I mean, not making it up as they go along, but certainly questioning themselves every single day, doubting what they're doing next. And that's been a real, well, it's reassuring, but also a real eye-opener.
Eye-opener, I'm sure. And why did you go into law in the first place?
I did politics at university and I found that very interesting, but I got very involved in the Labour Party and became pretty disillusioned pretty quickly with politics itself.
Yes.
No criticism there of anyone who is involved, but that gave me an exposure to law and how it works. And so as a result of that, that's when I decided to do the law conversion course in the LPC and I went into law that way.
So why family law? Because actually family law is dominated by women for starters.
It is.
Because it's quite grim in the sense of divorce, contact, so on and so forth.
I mean, I think any litigation discipline, so a discipline where you have got people falling out, you are at, you are a distress purchase because you are dealing with individuals who can't agree things between themselves. In terms of how I got into it, the answer is initially complete accident. I applied to a number of firms. I wanted to work at a mid-sized firm, and the firm I liked the atmosphere of the most happened to be the number one for family law in the country at the time. As a result of that, every trainee did a seat in family law. So I did my first seat there and I thought, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do litigation or corporate. But actually, I fell in love with it instantly because you've got this funny balance of it is very commercial, or bits of it are very commercial.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are genuinely, and I know this is not fashionable to say it, but you are genuinely having an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And the final thing is the variety. I can be trying to understand a share purchase agreement in the morning. I can be dealing with someone who has discovered that their partner has had a relationship or relationships in some case, at lunchtime. Yeah. And I could be dealing with rushing off to court for an emergency application relating to a child by mid-afternoon. Yeah. And that's the stress of the job, is you genuinely don't know what any given day is going to bring, but that's also the drug.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what are the most significant developments in your field over the last 20 years or so, would you say? And I'll come to no-fault divorce in a minute, but no-blame divorce.
Okay, so we'll touch on no-fault divorce shortly, but actually, just as I was starting to qualify, there'd been a very big case called White and White, where for the first time the Supreme Court recognised that the domestic contribution of the homemaker, so the person that stays at home, raises a family, runs the household, is equal to the commercial contribution, the financial contribution.
Yes.
And that really did drive a coach and horses through everything that had gone before.
Absolutely.
One of my partners, Beth Wilkins, is 73, and she can remember the day where you were quite literally fighting for every penny to ensure that your client, if she was the wife, and I know that's a stereotype, but of course in those days, it was still very much, wife was the homemaker, man was the income generator. Whereas actually then the law suddenly changed and the court said, well, no, hang on a second. Why don't we start from a position of equality and work backwards rather than the other way around? Yeah. And we are still to this day seeing the kind of ripple effects that follow on from that. Yeah. What's most interesting is there is a bill going through Parliament at the moment by a lady called Baroness Deach, which is almost going the other way. So, for instance, this bill would limit maintenance to only 5 years, which, if you can imagine, could cause some real difficulties for some people. And there will be a get out that if it's real hardship, you'll be able to extend it. But I'd still say it's going to be, an assumption of 5 years unless you can establish otherwise.
Absolutely. And the majority of that will be women.
Quite right. Who are going to, it's still a statistical fact that that's going to most affect women. The other big change that we've seen is pre- and post-nuptial agreements.
Yes.
They're still not contracts. But nowadays, if you can tick the necessary boxes of things like independent legal advice, the agreement not being unfair, there being financial disclosures so you each know what the other's got before you sign up to a prenup, that nowadays the court will say, look, I'm going to enforce that unless you can show me a good reason otherwise. But we are, who'd have thought it, we're, one of the most romantic countries in the world, it seems, given the fact that these things are pretty standard in most states of America. They're pretty standard across Europe. But for some reason, we Brits seem to be holding back on them.
Yes, I know. Well, it is unromantic. I don't want to disclose all my handbags before.
Yeah, I mean, heaven forbid, right?
I know. I mean, I've been married a long time, so yeah. Anyway, moving on. What are your thoughts then on the no-blame divorce? I mean, what do you say to critics who claim it makes it easy to dissolve a marriage?
I would say two things. One is, I've been doing this job for 17 years. I've got, as a firm, we've got about 500 clients at the moment. What I can say as fact on the ground is no one takes this decision lightly. Yeah. People don't wander in and say, do you know what? Over the weekend, I had a great idea. I'm going to get divorced. So the idea that if there isn't a hurdle to clear, people will suddenly wander into it and do it is a nonsense. Yeah. The second thing I'd say to critics is, let's assume what I'm saying is right. Let's assume what I'm saying is fact, that no one goes into it lightly. What you have to do at the moment is, if there hasn't been adultery, you have to have blame, which means before you even start the process, and, dividing two households is difficult enough. Agreeing how children are going to divide their time is difficult enough. But most importantly, just dealing with the emotional fallout of realising that your marriage is over is difficult enough. It does not need a hand grenade, which is effectively what this is, of having to blame someone and coming up with 4 or 5 examples of what the other person has done wrong and labelling it unreasonable behaviour. I mean, it's outrageous if you think about it. We all know lots of people, family, friends, etc., where actually no one's really to blame. Yeah. It's just 2 individuals who have grown incrementally further and further apart without realising. until it's too late to turn back.
Yeah.
And in those situations, do we really want to be blaming one another? No, we don't. So, let's be adult about it. If we both accept that this marriage is irretrievably broken down, let's get on with it without there being unnecessary conflict.
Yes, or continuing. Thanks, James. I just wanted to ask you about what further developments in family law you'd like to see. I know you've been a big campaigner in the Fduct courts, and that's been something that you and Sam, your business partner, have been passionate about. But is that one of the developments you'd like to see in the law? I just wondered if you had any thoughts about future developments in family law.
Yeah, well, I think Fduct's a really interesting example because it's not the Fduct courts themselves are a problem-solving approach to family breakdown. So, put simply, care proceedings before the Fduct court started were binary. If you were a good parent, you get to keep your child. If you're a bad parent, your child gets taken away. I know I'm oversimplifying, but it helps to understand it in that way. There was a judge called Nick Crichton in London who said he took, I think, his 13th child off the same mother because she had very serious addiction issues. And he said, look, enough is enough. There must be a better way. And he was the person who pioneered, alongside a number of other very creative legal brains, and said, you know what, there must be a better way. So he developed this 2-track system. One was the traditional care system. And alongside that ran these new Fduct courts. And in the Fduct courts, get rid of the lawyers. So, that's a good step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah.
And secondly, bringing in true experts. So bringing in an addiction expert, bringing in a social worker, bringing in for example, a plan in order to keep the mother protected, for example, in case it's actually an abusive relationship which is causing the problem. Yeah. And he effectively said, look, let's design a plan that works for you. If you stick to that plan, I, the judge, will be on your side with the ultimate carrot, which is you will get to rebuild your life with your child.
Yeah.
But if you don't commit to that plan that we're all designing together, we bounce back to the other track, which is, I'm really sorry, proper hardcore care proceedings, the ultimate sort of carrot and stick, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing thing, and it's been hugely successful, not only in reuniting children with their birth parents, but most importantly, the number of people who are still clean 5 years down the line. So even just as a solution to addiction problems, it's been highly effective. For the bean counters, it's been a massive economic success as well. For every pound spent, I think it's £2.30 gets saved, which is,
this is huge.
A lesson to us all, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is then taking a step back from that, the really amazing thing about it is not just obviously that it's successful statistically. The really amazing thing is someone saying, do you know what, maybe there's a better way here. Maybe rather than just the old-fashioned binary head-to-head system, in that case, state versus parent, in order to protect child. Well, actually, I think right across our legal discipline, coming up with more creative solutions to relationship breakdown or even any discipline of the law which is involved in litigation, I think is got to be the way forwards. Yeah. Because we are dealing with the legal system, which in some cases is 150 years old, and process which is 150 years old. And of course it has to evolve step by step. But what I would say is look at that. That is a beacon of, do you know what? We don't have to do it that way. We can do it differently, and it can really work.
And how did you get on that campaign with Lord Mummery? He was a former president of the Family Division.
That's right. It was a complete accident. So when we started our firm, and again, it sounds slightly cheesy, but we sort of think of it as the 4 C's is what Sam and I call it. So C number 1 is commercial, being a strong commercial performer as a firm because it allows us to do everything else.
Yes.
The second C is the clients, so providing excellent legal advice, always being accessible, etc. The third C is colleagues, so making sure that we are, touch wood, a good employer with the various benefits we employ in the ways that we work. But the fourth was community. And, there's lots and lots of law firms that sort of pay lip service to CSR, etc. And there are lots of law firms who do it really, really well. And we wanted to be in that latter category. So we've done a few things from, supporting local charities through to we fund underprivileged students through law degrees at Manchester University. But we were looking for a big sort of standalone project.
Yes.
And at the time of the Fduct campaign starting, we were looking into setting up our own legal advice centre. and using a proportion of our profits to actually fund a standalone
Fantastic.
legal advice centre. Yeah, and interestingly, there are some great examples of that in Manchester and right across the country. Where I met my wife was a charity in the East End of London called Toynbee Hall, and they were one of the oldest legal advice centres in the country, which set up back in Victorian times.
Oh, right.
But anyway, we were investigating this and realising a couple of things. One is that we were very keen not to sort of take oxygen in terms of publicity or take food out of the existing legal advice centres that were doing it.
Yeah.
But similarly, we didn't just want to write a cheque to those legal advice centres because inevitably control is a thing for us, and we wanted to ensure that the legal advice centre was being run in the way we'd want it to. And we were quite literally walking back from a meeting with one of these legal advice centres, having looked into it, and on Sam's phone up popped an appeal from Nick Crichton, the judge we were talking about before, who invented the Fduct process, talking about the national unit, which runs the entire Fduct system, closing. Yeah. And the fact that all, in inverted commas, they needed was £250,000, which the government wasn't prepared to give them. So we dropped him an email and said, look, we're looking for a project. We've got some cash. What about instead of the cash that we were going to put into a legal advice centre, we send that in your direction. But what we also try and do is generate funds from other family law firms to make up the shortfall. He said, yeah, great idea. Within 24 hours, we were sitting in the House of Lords with this kind of action committee that he'd put together, feeling like proper imposters, sitting there. But as it was, we then approached a number of family law firms. We were singularly unsuccessful in raising money from that source. Who knew, right?
Yeah,
that
I
some
know.
of those stereotypes exist for a reason.
If you're listening now.
Except what I will say is a firm in London called Family Law in Partnership. They immediately committed and have been amazing ever since.
Fantastic.
But we got nothing else from any other other law firms. So what we said is, well, do you know what? We've got lots of contacts generally who are decent people who have some profit margin that they can spare. So we just raised it from other sources.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, there's an IFA organisation in there. There's a organisation called Ad Council who raise money, who deal with addiction problems, but for high net worth individuals. Yeah. And a number of private individuals who said, you know what, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And we raise the money that way.
Fantastic. James, I want to ask you a couple of questions really about you, James, the managing partner, if you like. You started your career, in fact, in London before you moved back to the north. Do you think the law still suffers from a north-south divide?
I think certainly family law does, no question. Not in terms of the calibre of lawyers. About 30-odd% of our work is from London because they are clients who recognise that they get just as good a legal advice in Manchester but a significantly lower hourly rate.
Yes.
Where there is a north-south divide in what I do is the judges' attitudes towards, for example, women who are getting divorced. And it is anecdotally, of course, before the Ministry of Justice gets hot under the collar, but anecdotally, the northern judges are not as generous to wives as judges in London are, both in terms of housing requirement. And I don't just mean, obviously, you need more to buy a house in London than you do to buy a house in Bolton.
Yes.
But more in terms of the levels of maintenance and how long that maintenance should last. There is a look, get out there and earn, get out there and, start working again in a way that London judges are a little bit more sympathetic.
Interesting, especially when we're talking about the Northern Powerhouse and the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. But there are, divisions in the economy. This London economy is obviously faster growing than the North. Yeah. So that's quite an interesting view. I want to ask you this. You've actually represented a number of very high-profile clients. I wondered what additional challenges did those cases bring?
Do you know what? I think probably the most interesting thing is about high-profile clients is, I think there's a tendency to think there's a degree of magic there. I don't think there is. I think genuinely clients are clients. Yeah. And I think across the spread of high-profile clients, you get some clients who are more demanding than others. You get some clients who are more challenging than others. But that's exactly the same as your, non-high-profile client base as well.
Yes.
The biggest driver for challenges and well-being in our discipline is the emotional needs of any client in any given situation, whether they are high net worth or not.
Yeah.
You get an awful lot of transference where you have individuals who are upset about the difficulties that they are having and very much look to blame you, which, of course, is an absolutely human reaction. There's a fantastic book called Persuasion, and in there he gives an example of weathermen who get death threats. And they get death threats because people are so upset about the weather forecast, and they get death threats because people, that idea of shooting the messenger really does psychologically exist. And of course, as a family lawyer, you are often the bearer of bad news and often get blamed for that. So actually, it's not so much whether they are high profile or not. It is what are their specific difficulties that they are struggling with.
Yes.
And therefore, you managing them through that process.
Yeah. So dealing with divorce, custody and other family matters must take a mental toll, as you said. How do you look after your well-being?
So I think there's a few things there. I think, one, we are very open with each other in the office. So we use each other as our first line of support. It is very natural to come off a difficult phone call or come out of a difficult meeting and share it with the team. And you will then find that actually sitting around that room, there's 4 or 5 other people who are not topping, but they can come back with their own horrendous story in terms of what's happened, and that can help you feel better.
Yes.
It's something that over the next 12 months we're specifically addressing, in that we are retaining a psychotherapist on a confidential basis who will be a hotline for our staff, so that they will be able to ring with difficulties they're having, either with clients or indeed at home or with us, God forbid, not with me, probably with Sam Hall. He's a nightmare.
He's not lovely.
Because it's something, law is really bad at it generally. Because I think there's still get on with it. What's the problem?
Yeah.
And I think family law in particular, you are often dealing with some incredibly distressing situations. And it's all well and good having a supportive team around you, but actually professional help can often be what is most beneficial, and trying to get in there before it becomes a problem is our big objective for the next 12 months.
It's just great to hear your firm doing such brilliant things on well-being. What is the profession learning, do you think, from its youngest members? What new attitudes or skills are millennial lawyers bringing to the profession, do you think? I
think there's 2 main areas. One is a real embrace of technology. It constantly amazes me that I can look across at a member of my team and she can be dictating a letter on digital dictation whilst uploading a tweet about the firm on her phone, and on the iPad scrolling through Facebook or Instagram in respect of what's happening in her personal life. I have, I'm one of those people like a child learning to walk.
Yeah,
I can walk, but if I talk at the same time, I fall over. I can literally do one thing at once. And it amazes me. But of course, they will then often come to us and say, well, what's the problem? Why don't we have this in terms of a way of preparing bundles, because it's so much quicker?
Yeah.
Why don't we all get 2 screens, because it means we are saving paper, for example?
Yeah.
And that embrace of technology, it really gets driven by them, because whilst, Sam and I are in that funny cross-generation. I wouldn't describe us as Luddites, but certainly we're not millennials. I remember arriving at university, we were the first year where we all automatically got given an email account. And it was a breakthrough, and we were like, goodness me, what's this?
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is a general attitude. They are much better, even than my generation, of working to live rather than living to work.
Yeah.
Mental well-being, being open about that, and the fact that, they may well have multiple careers in their life, as opposed to, when I came through, it was still very much you choose your career. Yeah. You were perhaps allowed one, new choice. You made a mistake, and you always imagined your mum explaining that to her friends when you were doing it. You were allowed one mistake, but then once you got on the path, you got the path. And goodness me, weren't you lucky to get a job in a respected law firm? And goodness me, weren't you lucky to be promoted? Whereas now it's the other way around. Now it is, like a sort of a cat versus a dog thing, rather than a dog being loyal wherever, which is probably what I was. Nowadays, like a cat, it's like, well, unless I provide a better home for them, then, they're going to
go off. Yeah.
They're going to go off next door.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you think is the one thing needs to change about the way in which lawyers work?
Well, you see, I'm slightly old-fashioned about this. I think that we need to be better at being more responsive to clients, which I don't think is that great necessarily for our mental health. But I think we need to wake up to the fact that we are a service. Whether we like it or not, we're going to be put under pressure by technology, which with the assistance of millennials is going to take a large part of our work away.
Yeah.
The rise of AI is a very real threat's the wrong word, because if it's used in the right way, it can be a support. But, if it's used in the wrong way, it could be a threat.
Yeah.
And, really, what do we offer? Well, what we offer is a human brain, an emotional and sometimes actual arm around the shoulder for our clients, particularly in family law. It's a very difficult time. Well, you can't do that and say to yourself, this is why we are better than technology, and at the same time not be available all the time.
Yeah.
There's still, for some, this attitude of, I am the lawyer, you will do what I say because I'm the clever one with the degree. There is still this desire to tell people the law. Well, clients aren't interested in the law. They want an answer to their question.
Yes.
So I would say we still need to get better at being human beings who get properly understanding into what it is our clients need. And that carries massive stresses in terms of, well-being for the lawyers.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's the profession that we chose to do. And if you want to be truly excellent at it, I think that's the direction we all need to continue going in.
So do you think that we genuinely enjoy a good work-life balance? Is it possible for lawyers to enjoy a good life balance?
I think it is difficult, particularly if you want to do it at the sorts of levels that clients often demand, and I would say are often entitled to demand. The flip side of that is I approach it slightly differently. I have on my staircase some black and white photographs of family members, grandparents, etc. And in one of the photographs is my grandfather on my mother's side, and it was taken the day before he became a prisoner of war. Fortunately, he came out the other end. Next to that is a photograph of my grandfather on my dad's side, and he and his mates are standing in front of the Lancaster bomber that they're about to get into, at 22 years old. Get yourself into a tin can, fly over Germany, kill some people whilst being shot at by other people, and the other guy, is about to be a prisoner of war for the next 3 years. Well, I tell you what, it doesn't know how to put your life into perspective.
Absolutely.
When you're saying, do you know what, I've got a very difficult podcast to do this morning. You're sitting and you're saying, well, hang on a second, these dudes had to do this for us. So when people talk about work-life balance, I think it's not so much you should be expected to work. I think often certainly for me, it really helps me if I reframe my brain and I say, do you know what, I am absolutely blessed to be able to do a job where for talking and or writing, I get paid the hourly rate, which is very reasonable, of course. I get paid the hourly rate that I charge. And and I get to make a living doing that. I'm not going down a mine.
Yeah.
I'm not, which is what, my previous generations had to do. And I'm not getting in a tin can and having to go and kill children and be shot at. So, for me, the work-life balance is a bit more complicated because I sit and I say, well, what a privilege it is for me to do this.
Yeah.
And what a privilege to do it in a generation where, I can work at home, which means I can have my daughter sitting next to me doing her homework while I'm typing out an email rather than having to do it chained to a desk. Absolutely.
Well, James, I want you to share with us some of the innovations your firm has introduced which put your staff's life ahead of their work. So I love this, such as the missing sports day. I just love this. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'd say the first thing is we try and actually sort of live our values. I know it's an Americanism. No offence to those of us who might shortly be moving to America, but kind of
embracing it.
So the first thing is we kind of live our values, and what that means is I drop my kids at school every morning, for example.
Yes.
Never miss a sports day. Never miss a activity play. Because it's all well and good an employer saying, No, we're a flexible employer. Don't worry about it. You do what you need to do. If they're sitting there from 7 in the morning until 8 at night, fact, people coming in and out will feel like they are being clock watched.
Yeah.
So firstly, by saying this isn't just lip service, I don't get in until 20 to 10 because I drop my own kids. I will walk out at 3 o'clock for an nativity play, etc. That's the first thing, and a really important message to say, this isn't just lip service.
Yeah.
We have a, you get fired if you miss sports day policy.
I just love that.
And this came about because we had a member of staff who recently joined us, and she sort of came off the phone and she sounded, kind of relatively glum. And and Sam said, are you all right? And she said, well, no, it's slightly frustrating because my husband's going to miss our son's sports day. To which I said, I'm sorry about that. What time does it start? And she said, well, in an hour. And he said, well, you better get going. And she was like, well, I wasn't going to go. I've only just recently started. To which Sam was like, so no one's going to see your son at sports day? get out now, and said, if I find you sitting here in 10 minutes, then you're fired. And it was a bit of a joke, but it became a sort of a proper mantra of ours because, in the nicest possible way, we've all got emails now, haven't we? We've all got, remote working. So what's the problem? Worst case scenario, someone else can deal with it if it's a true emergency. Worst case scenario, just give the client back after, everything's done and finished or whatever. And more likely, it could probably wait till tomorrow, can't it? Let's face it.
Absolutely.
But you get, 5 sports days that your children want you to be at?
Yes.
And then a few others that you impose yourself on, Make the most of it. So we do that, and then we have sort of, the kind of, we're flexible working. We have a strong maternity leave policy, including the automatic entitlement to return back to work 3 days a week for the first month after you come back, 4 days a week for the month after. So you don't even need to ask. And that's in addition to your, entitlement to flexible working. We have a physio who comes in every other week. We do yoga on the off weeks. In theory, we have lower targets for our lawyers, although we've been so busy. Most of them smash those targets.
Brilliant.
Anyway, although that's something we need to work on, and we're trying to recruit enough to kind of keep pace with demand so that we can get people back to hopefully walking out at a decent time. We give an update every week as to where we are up to so that people know where we are. We're a proper open plan office because lots of law firms remarkably still put their partners in offices, which amazes me because it says, before you've even opened your mouth, it says, I'm more important than you are, which is ridiculous. Rather than same desk, same computer, same phone, etc. We're doing a away weekend for all of the staff that they can bring their partners to that we fully fund. We have a never put your hand in your pockets policy. So if you're on a work night out, be it, networking or otherwise, we will pay for your taxi. We will pay for your hair and makeup if that's what you want to do. We will pay for your drinks.
Wow, we need to work here. I didn't do family law, sadly.
Well, it used to amaze me that you'd go out selling the firm and yet end up 200 quid down. And you were like, well, hang on a second, there's something wrong there.
Yes.
So it means you're saying to people, look, if you want to go out, it's a decision for you. And if you want to do that, brilliant. But you shouldn't end up being worse off for it. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what else we do? Well, we're making it up as we go along. So, we'll know, we're only going for 3 years, so we'll find out whether long term they're good decisions or not. But that's what we're doing at the moment.
You're doing fantastic well, and your retention is amazing. So I'm delighted you're doing all these new innovative things. And so, have you got a favourite fictional lawyer at all?
I do. Yeah. So
can you share that with us?
So I used to and still love The West Wing as a TV show.
Oh yes.
And there was a lawyer in that called Oliver Babish, where the president had done something a little bit naughty, as in misled the electorate about the fact that he had MS. So, query whether that's very naughty or a little bit naughty. But anyway, there's this amazing scene where Oliver Babish first gets involved, the White House lawyer, and he basically said, I will only take this case for you and protect you if you promise to do every single thing I say. Now, of course, at that point it's fictional because the president agrees, and anyone who's been a lawyer for any length of time says, I have yet to have a client who does everything I ask. You know what I mean? We'd all have the perfect case if it wasn't for the client,
absolutely.
Right? And so he is my absolute favourite because finally there was this lawyer who managed to persuade his client to actually do and follow his advice, whereas I think I'm running at a sort of a 50-50 at best with my clients. They're like, well, I'll do some of it, but I'm not doing that over there.
And is there a book that you've read that has inspired you or stayed with you?
Yeah, I mean, this sounds as though I'm a bit obsessed with American politics. I'm genuinely not. But actually, there is an amazing book about the rise of Bill Clinton called First in His Class by a chap called David Moranis. And it charts childhood up to his nomination to be the Democratic candidate. So none of the stuff that follows, which of course we've all had so much about, and none of the perhaps more damaging decisions that he made in his career, let's put it like that. But there's two amazing things about the book. One is this man, and I know he's not a fashionable hero, in inverted commas, to have for obvious reasons, but he was a truly brilliant mind. And this really shines through in the book. And this was, bear in mind, this was the author through this book that exposed a number of Bill's foibles in the first place, and he was the first to do it. So it's
Oh, right.
a very even-handed, this is no hero worship biography.
Interesting.
But what comes out is he is brilliant, truly brilliant, and born on the wrong side of the tracks, to an overused phrase. He had a abandoned father, very complicated relationship with his mother, and just through sheer kind of ambition and ability, he rose to ultimately become president. But of course, where the book leaves off, to become the Democratic candidate for president. So it is for any kind of, and I think we struggle a bit with diversity, in law. There's no question about that. So I would say for any kid who is doubting themselves, I would say, look, have a read of this, because it really does make you understand what in theory is, possible.
Possible, yeah.
But the other thing that comes out of the book is, and it's something I tell my clients time in, time out, he made a whole raft of mistakes in his career, and usually due to his own personal weaknesses. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And the book very much focuses on his early career, and when he made a mistake, he would apologise for it. He would mean it, in inverted commas, and people could decide for themselves whether or not to forgive him. And you know what? More often or not, they did.
Yeah.
Now, if you fast forward, of course, to Monica, that was the first time he didn't apologise, and guess what happened? He ended up being impeached.
Yeah.
And I say this to my staff, if you make a mistake, just tell us, because I bet you we can fix it.
Yeah.
But if you try and obfuscate or hide it, that's when it becomes a real problem. But I also say it to some of my naughtier, in inverted commas, clients.
Yes.
If you get caught out, own up, apologise to the court and to the other party, and 9 times out of 10, we could probably fix it. But if you don't, that's when the real problem comes, and you end up getting impeached or equivalent.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Yeah, fantastic. I actually want to read. I read a lot of Hillary stuff, but not much about Bill. And finally, James, can I ask you, have you got any quotes that you live your life by, or?
Only to go back to what we were talking about before in the photographs.
Yes.
I will often say to myself, you're not going down a mine, you're not going to war. What is the worst that happens?
Thank you so much to James Brown from Hall Brown for his time. I'm Sally Penny. Thank you again for listening to Talking Law. Do let us know what you think and perhaps who you would like to hear on future episodes by leaving us a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you subscribe, you won't miss an episode. This episode was brought to you by Hall Brown Family Law, based in Manchester and London. Do check in and see what we're up to at womeninthelawuk.com. See you then. Bye-bye.